Hey folks, just thought I'd provide a quick video introduction to this week's or this unit's content on Chapter 4. Talk a little bit about the concepts that are in the slides here and about how to approach some of the discussion questions once you get into that. So this idea of criterion referencing and norm referencing is a very important one to think about. When you design a test or an inventory or a survey of any kind, it's something you really need to have in the back of your mind. Are you going to conceive of this construct that you're measuring, the thing that you're measuring, in a way that it'll be interpreted relative to a norming group or relative to some specific criteria, or both perhaps. There are certainly constructs that can be measured and interpreted, scores can be interpreted in both ways, both criterion and norm referenced. So think about that as you're reading through the material. Also think about the first discussion question in eCollege this week as you're reading through. When have you encountered a norm referenced or criterion referenced test, and see if you can give an example of that. And as far as the content of the book goes and the slides, all these different, I'm looking at the book right now, excuse me, all the different types of scores that are presented in terms of percentile ranks and percentages and all the standard scores and everything. It's good to know those things so you can interpret all those scores. You won't find yourself using some of those scores in your practice. Some of them you'll use a lot. Z-scores, for example, I think are a very powerful thing. Grade level equivalents are used a lot, but it's something you really need to think about before you interpret it. So a couple things I didn't put in the slides that you definitely want to look at. One is on page 71, figure 4.2, which relates the normal curve to not only z-scores, but t-scores, deviation IQs, Stanines, STENs, and SAT and GRE scores, the CEB scores. So have a look at that. It's a nice analog to the figure I did include in the slides, figure 4.1, which relates percentiles to the normal curve. And you can see in there that many of those scores aren't on an equal interval. The spacing between the scores is different across the grade distribution, or the score distribution, the normal curve, while some of them are equal interval spacing. So think about that as well. And then one other thing that's not in the slides that you should look at, I couldn't include the table in there, was table 4.8 on page 79, is just a comparison between the different types of scores. I think that'll help you think about what it means to look at a z-score versus a t-score for a particular test. When you get to the discussion questions, the second question there, under questions for discussion number 3, it asks you if you're developing a new achievement test, how would you select your norming group? If you're developing a new inventory measuring personality traits, how would you select your norming group? I want you to think carefully about that when you start to discuss it. I also want you to think a little bit outside the box. So think about what the norming groups would be. Think about the purposes of the test. So rather than saying something like, well, it depends on the test, give an example of what you might be measuring and what your norming group might look like. And then for that last one, question 5, where you're interpreting the table of all the different scores. One thing I think that would be really helpful for you to think about specifically is interpreting those grade equivalent scores. As is mentioned in the text, that's something that's easy to misinterpret what a grade equivalent score means. So spend some time thinking about that. And as always, let me know if you have any questions about anything. Feel free to email, call, chat, Skype, whatever. And if I don't hear from you, then I'll see you in the next unit when we start to talk about week 3. And I will make another short video introduction then. So let me know if you have any questions.